So before I even get into this review, I want to preface it by saying that I'm a very casual Warhammer enjoyer. Meaning, I've dabbled with painting a few minis, I've played a number of the Warhammer games like the Total War games and Vermintide and so on, so I have a fairly basic understanding of the lore, factions and timelines of the Warhammer universe. That being said, I'm no means a master, and if there is a Warhammer Giga Chad watching this and I say something completely incorrect, just ignore me. My stupid monkey brain is bound to say something wrong eventually. But with that said, grab your bolter, don your power armor, and let's kill some fucking heretics. Boltgun has you step into the ironclad boots of Malum Cato, a Sternguard veteran of the Ultramarines' First Company, tasked by Inquisitor Sibel to help retrieve a stolen power source and purge the forces of chaos from the Forgewell Grail with the help of your squad. However, as the Marines make planetfall, their drop pod is badly damaged, and you soon find yourself the sole survivor on a hostile planet with nothing but a servo bot for company. The game is split into 3 chapters, consisting of 6 or so levels each. Each one of these levels will take you anywhere from 10 to 25 minutes to finish, depending how much time you dedicate to exploring and looking for secrets. Now you'll find most of these levels play exactly the same way. You start the level, fight your way through to a central hub area, where your progress will then be limited by one or more colour-coded doors. The next objective is simple: find the corresponding key to that door, usually hidden somewhere nearby in the level, before returning and then moving on. Now when I say simple, I use this term very, very lightly. You'll find Boltgun's level design doesn't make it as easy as it may seem, but I'll touch on that a little bit later in this video. Almost all of these levels will have one or more arena-like areas which, once entered, will activate a purge event, and you'll need to either kill enough of the spawning enemies or kill the main mini-boss to progress. Most of these areas are large open maps with plenty of room to move around and require minimal thought about your movement. However, sometimes you will find yourself fighting waves of enemies in smaller, trickier to navigate rooms or even on elevated paths. The latter will require you to be far more conscious of your movement and even the weapons you use. But once you're done with your killing and maiming, your good old servo bot will be there for some heartwarming encouragement and a solid pat on the back.
I have exorcised the demons. This house is clear.
Due to Boltgun's old school labyrinthian level design and constant backtracking, one thing that may turn off some people, especially if they haven't played too many boomer shooters in the past, is the omission of a map. And having grown up playing games like Duke Nukem 3D and Quake, this was actually a really welcome change of pace. You usually get those big bright waypoints in your HUD that's so prevalent in games of today. Another thing that Boltgun takes in the past is its secrets and power-ups. Usually there will be 6 or more of these hidden around each level. Some are obvious in an indirect path, others are hidden in crates or hard to reach places, and some are hidden behind old school false walls. Generally speaking, you'll find 3 types of pickups around each level. These are either going to be level permanent ones, timed, or consumable pickup of some description. The level permanent ones consist of things like different ammo types for your bolter, or maybe they'll give you max ammo. Sometimes you'll find the extremely useful machine spirit, which affects each weapon differently, usually resulting in a bigger magazine or quickened rate of fire. The timed power-ups are definitely the strongest and most useful of the 3. They consist of things like infinite ammo, ultra damage, and the powered up chainsword. The final type are consumable pickups, which generally consist of things like maximum armor or vortex grenades. These are always single use items. Pretty much all of these were extremely fun to use, especially if you managed to stack a couple of the stronger ones together like infinite ammo or ultra damage. However, most of these timed ones will be found in the aforementioned purge areas, where I'd be focusing more on movement and killing rather than exploring. More than once did I clear a purge and then later find a Aura of Doom pickup hidden away somewhere, and it's like, cool, here's 30 seconds of ultra damage I can't use. I guess I'll just stand around and wait for this to wear off. I feel like having some of these power-ups so hidden takes away from the emergent gameplay just a little bit. Alright, quickly circling back to level design. You and your servo bot will slaughter your way across a good variety of locations, everything from snowy mountains, deserts, gothic cathedrals, foundries, and heaps more. And there really are some memorable levels in this game, such as the one where you move through a room full of different portals and they change your orientation as you go through them. There's the one which is a huge moving elevator which doubles as a battle arena. I love finding my way through these, they're so drenched in that gritty, grimdark Warhammer atmosphere. You really got to give it to the developers Auroch Digital. They've done a great job making a world that not only looks fantastic but also feels consistent. The colourful texture work is really nice, and the authenticity of detail in the level, enemy and weapon designs really shines through. It's honestly hard to not appreciate the love and care put into it, even as a casual Warhammer fan. This detail also carries through to the beautifully drawn and rendered cutscenes between each of the story chapters. These are used to convey and push forward the main story arc of Boltgun. Now, would I say you need to play this game for the story? Well, no. The story is fairly basic and it's definitely there for people who want it, but it's easily outshined by what Boltgun does best, and that's gunplay. The game knows what its strength is, and it really does lean into that power fantasy of being a pissed off, unstoppable space marine with a thirst for demon blood. The most common of these demons you'll face are the cultist classes, the pink and blue horrors, and the nurglings. While these boogers aren't necessarily deadly by themselves, they will usually ambush you in large mobs and it can be quite dangerous if caught off guard. Some of the tougher enemies you'll find are the Chaos Space Marines, Terminators, Aspiring Champions, Plague Frogs, Ambles and Flamers. These definitely put up more of a fight, and a single one of these can pretty easily kill you if you're not careful. For example, the Aspiring Champion is particularly deadly, having a powerful range attack but also the ability to bum rush if you get too close to it. And even then, once you think you've killed them, there's a chance these pricks come back to life as a chosen champion, with more health and a taste for revenge. And finally, there are the bosses, which are mostly reserved for the end of chapter fights, so you better bring your A-game and a shitload of bullets, because these guys take a lot of hurt to bring down. There are 4 archetypes of these guys, each with their own attack patterns and fighting styles, but most of these fights are going to play out exactly the same way. They just require you to keep moving and send as many bullets their direction as you possibly can. There's a couple of things I find disappointing with this. The first one is that there really isn't much skill involved, just keep moving and keep shooting until they're dead. The second is that most of these bosses are reused throughout the game without any changes. It's not inherently a bad thing, but maybe a change of name or colour might have made them slightly more interesting to fight for a second or third time. Now of course, if we're talking about demons to kill, we have to talk about guns, and Boltgun does this so very well. True to the tabletop counterpart, each enemy in the game has a certain level of toughness, and each weapon has a respective strength level. And this is visually represented by an icon next to the health of your enemy. If the strength of the gun is higher than the toughness of your enemy, the icon will be green, representing a good or maximum amount of damage. If the icon is yellow, it means you'll do a normal amount of damage, and if it's red, it represents a low or minimal damage. So the more you play Boltgun, the more you'll learn what gun to use in what situation, and the more you get into the rhythm of its rock, paper, scissors style of combat. Now the first weapon you'll be introduced to is your chainsword, perfect for when a bolt round from far away isn't quite personal enough for you. When using the sword in range of an enemy, time will briefly slow down and a red outline will appear on your target, before you are able to quickly close the gap and, go to town on their face. Not only can you use this effectively in combat, but it can also be used as a means of traversal. More than once I found myself using this to get to enemies above or below me on different floors. Up next is the bolter. This thing is going to be your bread and butter. There was never a time when I didn't use this gun, from the first level to the last. It always found its way back to my hands. I think it's due to the abundance of ammo available and also the good damage output. You'll find it effortlessly cuts through the lower level enemies and does a good amount of consistent damage to the tougher ones as well. The shotgun is a staple of boomer shooters, so of course Boltgun's going to have one in the game. Deadly at close range and super effective crowd control, this is your go-to weapon when accuracy doesn't matter too much and you just want to shred through your enemies. Of course it's not as effective on tougher enemies or at long ranges, but it does wonders on things like nurglings and cultists. The plasma gun is your stand-in rocket launcher. Slow firing when you use a single shot, but ramps up fire rate and damage when you hold the trigger. There's not too many enemies this gun isn't good against. It's particularly useful against larger armoured enemies or groups of smaller, weaker enemies. The only downside to it is that you get locked into the animation of it firing. There were countless times when I would shoot it and then I needed to quickly switch to another gun but couldn't because the animation hadn't finished playing out. It's not deal breaking, but it's definitely annoying, especially when you're in a heated situation and every second counts. Okay, so definitely the best sounding gun in the game, the Heavy Bolter is an absolute force to be reckoned with. This turned out to be my oh shit time to panic gun when I became overwhelmed with enemies. It's one of the only guns in the game which doesn't need to be reloaded, so as long as you have ammo, you just hold the trigger. Bigger, heavier and faster firing than a standard bolter, this is probably my second most used gun in the game. Mainly because of its great damage output and also its orgasmic sound. I mean, just have a listen. Next we have the Vengeance Launcher. This is a glorified grenade launch with delayed explosives. Honestly, it's probably my least favourite and least used gun in the game, only because I never found an enemy which is actually worth using against. It kills weaker enemies one hit, which is great and is good against mobs, but I found it easier and quicker to switch to the bolter rather than use this, and it doesn't really do enough damage to warrant using on tougher enemies either. I usually found myself forgetting that I even had it until I ran out of ammo and my other guns were like, oh yeah, I better use this. So, how do you like your demons? Crispy? Good. Because boy do I have the gun for you. The melter gun shoots out a ring of superheated air which decimates enemies as it goes through them, particularly good against heavily armoured enemies like the flamers and blow drones. I also found it quite good at crowd control if I need it in a pinch against groups of nurglings or cultists. So in terms of how guns feel to use, I think the Volkite is probably my favourite gun to use in the entire game. Do you know the song Pop Goes the Weasel? Replace Weasel with Demon and you get the picture, this thing fucking shreds. Super fun when you stack up against a group of weaker enemies and just let it do the work for you, or if you want to whittle away at a tougher opponent, it's good for that too. And finally we have the Grav Cannon. This thing is basically the Volkite on steroids. It fires a powerful laser with a gravity field at the end of it, and wherever you shoot it does greater damage to enemies the more mass they have. It's effective against every enemy, and it's easily the most powerful gun in the game. However, its ammo supply is pretty limited, so you usually find yourself saving it for tougher or overwhelming fights. No matter what gun takes your fancy, the end result is always the same: dead heretics. And you know what? That's a good outcome. I think the reason the gunplay feels so good in this game is because of a couple of things. Firstly, just how visceral and gory the game is. There's nothing more satisfying than absolutely eviscerating a room full of baddies and being left with nothing but a bloody pile of goop. I actually started to use the bloody leftovers as a way of telling where I'd previously been and therefore where I needed to go. And secondly, the audio design is just great. While Boltgun takes its pixelated visuals from games of yesteryear, its sound and music are what you come to expect from a modern Warhammer game. The gun sounds are heavy and mechanical, the sound of bullets tearing through flesh is wet and satisfying. Hell, even just the noise of your character moving around sounds like a mech walking, and it's fucking cool, man. The score for the game really complements this as well. It's a great blend of different genres, things like metal and EDM meet with a touch of grimdark to become this dark gothic electronica anthem. It really gets the blood pumping and is perfect for purging the horrors of the warp to. So overall, it took me about 10 hours to complete Boltgun on the Emperor's Mercy difficulty. This was me taking a bit of time to look for secrets, but not necessarily searching every single wall or nook and cranny. While fun, it did start to feel slightly tedious by the end, and I think if it weren't for the satisfying gunplay and sound design, it probably would have outstayed its welcome well before the 10-hour mark. With that being said, I do think Auric Digital really have done a fantastic job at making a boomer shooter for the modern age. The visuals are great, the controls are slick, and the sound is crunchy. Whether you're a fan of Warhammer, a fan of first-person shooters, or a fan of both, Boltgun is definitely a game that you should be checking out. So, what are you waiting for? Get out there and show those fucking heretics what happens when you mess with the Emperor's finest.